none of the main actors actually want a war. Israel doesn't want a war, although they may well be prepared to engage in one if necessary from their perspective, protect their interests, but they don't want one. I don't believe Hezbollah actually wants a war. By the way, Red Sea, the Houthis, same thing. Iranian-aligned militia groups. So much of this is tied to Gaza. And I think it underscores why it's clearly in the strategic interests of Israel as well to effectively bring this to a close.
Thank you. I want to switch to another part of the world and to another transnational threat, that of terrorism. You've spent an awful lot of time in the Middle East since October 7th and the horrific attacks that killed more than 1,200 Israelis and took another 250 Israelis hostage and dual nationals. You've been deeply involved with the diplomatic effort to try to bring an end to the war and to bring about the release of those still held against their will in Gaza. President Biden put forward an announcement just about a month ago of a plan that would lead to a durable ceasefire over phases and to the release of those remaining hostages. What is your sense of the likelihood that that plan can, in fact, come to fruition? And if it cannot, is there a plan B?
I think the proposal that President Biden put forward is achievable, doable, which doesn't mean it will be achieved, doesn't mean it will be done, but it can be and it should be. And what we saw after he put out the proposal is quite remarkable. We've seen virtually the entire world come together in support of that proposal. Country after country standing up saying, yes, we support this. This is the way forward. This is the way to end the conflict in Gaza. This is the way to get the hostages home. This is the way to put us on a path to more durable security, more durable peace, a better future for Palestinians, for Israelis, and actually for the entire region. And so everyone came together in support with one exception, and that was Hamas, which came back with, most charitably, a yes but, trying to impose new conditions, moving the line, actually coming back on positions it had already agreed to, and trying to get more. So we've been in an intense effort with the Egyptians, with the Qataris, to see if we could close the gaps that Hamas created in not saying yes to a proposal that everyone, including the Israelis, had said yes to. And we're working that almost literally as we speak. I believe that it is, yes, achievable. And it would be the best way forward, the quickest way to end the conflict in Gaza, to stop the violence, to massively surge assistance, to get everyone home, including American hostages. But it's also true that one individual, likely buried hundreds of feet underground in Gaza, has the decision-making power to say yes or no. And right now, in not saying yes, Mr. Sinwar is not only holding on to Israeli, American, and other hostages, he's continuing to make a hostage of Palestinian children, women, and men who are caught in a horrific crossfire of Hamas's making. So the question that I can't answer for you is, will he get to yes? The world is looking for it. The world is asking for it. The world is demanding it. Now, if not, of course, we're looking at what comes next, and I think what's critical is this. We'll see. We've heard the Israelis talk about a significant downshift in their operations in Gaza. Remains to be seen. We do know this, one way or another. When this conflict ends, it cannot and must not end with a vacuum in Gaza. It has to end in a way that makes sure that there are clear, coherent, achievable plans for Gaza's governance, for its security, and of course, to start to help people to rebuild their lives that have been so decimated and destroyed. We've been working over the last months with partners throughout the region to develop those plans. And as I said a couple of weeks ago when I was last in the region, a lot of that work is now turned into concrete ideas, concrete proposals that we're sharing with partners in the region, again, as we speak, to try to flesh things out and to try to make sure that we have the broadest possible agreement on what the right way forward is. So The post-conflict plans are critical because if we get to a moment where the conflict really does shift dramatically, and hopefully the best possible thing would be the ceasefire, if we're not ready, if the region's not ready, then you're going to have a vacuum. And as I said before, vacuums tend to get filled by bad things before they get filled with good things. And we know that there are three things that are unacceptable for Gaza's future: an Israeli occupation, Hamas perpetuating its leadership, or chaos, anarchy, lawlessness, which is what we're seeing in big parts of Gaza today. Absent concrete plans to have an alternative to that, that one of those three things is going to happen. And given all of the extraordinary suffering that we've seen to date, that should be unacceptable, and it's unacceptable to us.
And the plans that you've been discussing with regional partners and others, are they ready to go? If for some reason Sinwar were to suddenly have a flash of humanity and accept the plan for a ceasefire and release the hostages, would we be able to move immediately to put the security, the governance, and the start of a reconstruction program in place? Or are we likely to be outpaced by other adversaries in the region who, in past conflicts, have moved more quickly than the international community?
Well, we're determined not to be outpaced, which is exactly why we're leaning into this. It's exactly why we've been calling on so many of the concerned countries to engage in this effort. We really started back in January with many Arab partners on this. We've told the Israelis that we expect of them to develop their own plans, their own ideas, and we've not seen enough of that from Israel. But no, precisely because we don't want to be caught off guard by this. This is exactly what all of our diplomats are deeply engaged in as we speak, so that we are ready when we get the moment, and we need to get that moment as quickly as possible.
One last question before I turn it over to the audience for just a few questions before we, unfortunately, will have to let Secretary Blinken go back to his very busy day. We have with us in the audience former U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon, Jeff Feltman. We were speaking before the festivities began here about the prospects for significant action in Lebanon. The Israelis seem to be signaling that quite heavily right now, particularly as they downshift in Gaza, that they will have more capabilities to apply to dealing with the threat that is posed by Hezbollah that has forced at least 55,000 Israelis out of their homes in the north. How imminent do you rate that threat, and what is it that the United States is doing to try to develop diplomatic alternatives to a military solution to Hezbollah, which we know has been quite elusive over the decades?
One of our primary objectives from day one, since October, was to do everything we could to make sure that this conflict didn't spread, didn't escalate, including and notably to the north, to Lebanon, to Hezbollah, and then maybe beyond. And so this, too, is a place of intense focus. And I think you have a paradox in this moment, which is that, at least in our judgment, none of the main actors actually want a war. Israel doesn't want a war, although they may well be prepared to engage in one if necessary from their perspective, protect their interests, but they don't want one. I don't believe Hezbollah actually wants a war. Lebanon certainly doesn't want a war because it would be the leading victim in such a war. And I don't believe that Iran wants a war, in part because it wants to make sure that Hezbollah is not destroyed and that it can hold on to Hezbollah as a card if it needs it, if it ever gets into a direct conflict with Israel. So on the one hand, no one actually wants a war. On the other hand, you have forces, momentum, that may be leading in that direction, and which we are determined to try to arrest. You have, as you said, Suzanne, 60,000 or so Israelis who've been forced from their homes in northern Israel. Israel has effectively lost sovereignty in the northern quadrant of its country because people don't feel safe to go to their homes. You have many Lebanese in southern Lebanon who've also been chased from their homes. And absent doing something about the insecurity, people won't have the confidence to go back. And that requires two things. It requires, first and foremost, of course, stopping the firing across the border that's endangering people. But it also requires an agreement, reached through diplomacy, to try to deal with some of the elements that are causing this ongoing insecurity, including making sure that forces, for example, are pulled back so that they can't endanger people every single day and that people have the confidence to proceed. Here again, the United States has been deeply engaged in trying to advance this diplomacy, but it also underscores why a ceasefire in Gaza is so critical. Hezbollah, of course, has tied what it's doing to the situation in Gaza and has said that if there's a ceasefire in Gaza, it will stop firing in Israel. Now, it shouldn't be firing to begin with. It's wrong in and of itself, but it's also a reality. So it only underscores why getting that ceasefire could also be critical to further enabling the diplomacy to try to create conditions in which the diplomacy can really resolve this problem, get people back to their homes in Israel, in southern Lebanon, and have something that's more enduring in terms of keeping things calm. By the way, Red Sea, the Houthis, same thing. Iranian-aligned militia groups. So much of this is tied to Gaza. And I think it underscores why it's clearly in the strategic interests of Israel as well to effectively bring this to a close.